Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Also, Max Klein did the new logos for the new podcasts, and he's done the two for the other podcasts, Living with a Invisible Learning Challenge and Sleepy Butterfly.
Happy Friday. So today's topic will be about MLB voting and politics. Have you ever had challenges voting because of your lack of knowledge of politics, not knowing exactly how politics and voting works, or because your mind tends to go too black and white when you're thinking about political things? I know for me, it was hard to vote when I was 18 because I didn't know much about politics. I didn't really know how much effect voting could take on society. I also didn't really know how democratic I was, or if I was liberal. I also had challenges with understanding the differences between liberal, democratic, Republican, and conservative, far left, moderate, and far right. I didn't have much knowledge of the news either, which made it more difficult to vote. I also didn't know that I had NLD when I was 18. This meant I wasn't aware of what effects that it would have on me voting and understanding politics. It's hard to understand them because NDLDers tend to take things too literally, and it's difficult to grasp abstract concepts. It's also difficult for us to keep all the all the meanings of words about politics untangled from each other so we don't confuse them with the wrong meaning. There are many terms in politics, government, and voting that are hard for me to understand because I don't know what all of them mean or what they are all for. Okay, enough about me. To provide some time to provide some quotes from articles on the relationship between voting and being neurodivergent. And before I do that, quick side note of talking about politics on here. I know I don't usually do that, but it just it's something that's related to MLB, and I wanted to bring it up because I felt like it would be a good topic, and um, I would say it's also related to being neurotypical because you can have the same challenges that I would have because of the things I stated before, like maybe you don't really um, understand politics, and you have a hard time with understanding that. So if that could be why, and if you if you try to keep up with the news and it's hard to understand it, that could also be why. So that's part of the reason why, or part of some of the reasons I'm bringing it up. But I'm a little tongue-tied. Okay, so here is the first article that I want to use. It's called "The Right to Vote and Autism" by Lauren Shotwell. Quote, "The art of autism encourages those on the autism spectrum to vote. Many candidates have disability platforms. For many on the autism spectrum, disability funding is decided through voting process." Below is an excerpt from an article about disabilities and voting called "Election Day Equality: Access is Critical" from Little Village Magazine. End quote. Um, The invisible barriers for neurodiverse people and ones on the autism spectrum. Quote, "Some barriers to voting may not be immediately visible to poll workers." Rick Shannon, the public policy manager for the Iowa Development Disabilities Council and ID Action, said they found the number one barrier to voting is that people are overwhelmed by the amount of information out there or uncertain how to access that information. Excuse me. Whether it's information about the voting process, how to register, or information about where the candidates stand on policy issues. For those on the autism spectrum, the challenges can include feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information available and becoming anxious about the need to navigate the social aspects of the voting process when voting in person, said Heather Haslich Jacks, an autism spectrum consultant with Finger Place. "We're not crazy, not lazy, not begging for attention," said Joel Schrader, who was diagnosed with Asperger's, which was in 2013, um, when he was in his 20s. That's what he said. "We don't want pity, and we're not doing this to annoy you or to cause problems. We just want to have our voices heard which is hard for us. We're not asking for special treatment. This is just us just asking for equal opportunities to be heard. End quote. I can relate to what Lauren said about being overwhelmed with the amount of information on politics and voting. It's hard to sift through all of it, especially if you don't know which parts are important or unimportant. It's also challenging to organize the information if you don't know where to begin on how to find or understand and research it. I can relate to Joel also because me being with NLD, sorry, because NLD is similar to autism and Asperger's in the following ways. It's difficult for us to process information quickly. It's challenging for us to be in social situations and settings. It's hard for us to fit in when we don't belong in the neurotypical world. It was built for neurotypicals, not neurodivergents. We also have challenges with being our authentic selves because we think if we mask or hide who we truly are, it will be easier for us to function when in reality that makes it more difficult. This relates to politics because if we have to work harder to process new information, it will take us longer to understand it. It will take longer for us to know how to have others help us understand politics if we have challenges with social situations. It will also be challenging for us to be authentically ourselves, which might affect how we want to vote if we think we should vote how our friends and family are, even if we think differently from them. If we are so used to masking who we truly are, it can be difficult to know what we truly want in life and who we truly are. For me, I don't mask who I am because it gets too tiring to do it. It doesn't help me know who I truly am when I'm around my family and friends. It makes it challenging for me to know how to relate to others if I don't know who I am. I'm sorry, some of this doesn't make sense to you. It's sometimes when I write podcast scripts, it's hard for me to write them because it makes sense in my head, but I want to make sure that they make sense to other people as well. Okay, this next article says why is it important for neurodivergents or people with intellectual disabilities to vote. It is titled Individuals with Intellectual Disabilities Can and Should Vote by Margaret Walsh. Quote, one perception that prevents adults with intellectual disabilities from participating in the voting process is the belief that they do not understand the voting process and may be unable to make complex decisions about questions on the ballot. This perception significantly underestimates this population's ability to grasp the issues that impact them most. For example, they know that budget cuts to the services they rely on will negatively impact their lives. Many adults with intellectual disabilities can make informed choices and need support to ensure that they can appropriately take part in the voting process. People who support adults with intellectual disabilities can help them register to vote, explain what to expect when they are voting, and make sure they know where they can vote in their community. They can assist them in filling out a mail-in ballot or accompany them to the polling place. End quote. So I relate to that because um, I remember when I was really getting into politics more and trying to understand them, it was hard for me to know how to find information on how to vote um, in an educated way and be able to make sure I knew information about what I was voting on, the plots and the people. So I asked my family, what are some good websites to read up on what the props mean and what the about the candidates and their history. So I used those websites, and I even remember googling some of the props to try to find governmental websites to use. Excuse me, and it took a while. It probably took 2 hours for me to do it, but it definitely was worth it to read about the material and make sure that I was voting the way that not only that I wanted to, but that I educated myself so that I could understand what I was voting on, either whether it was for or against that prop or that person. Um, that way, I, you know, could make the decision more easily. So the last article is titled "When It Comes to Disability, Our Voting Process is Leaving People Out" by Sarah Morrison. Quote, "Unfortunately, it often feels as though these same conversations are lacking in our world. That this issue is especially prevalent during election season. Although voting is a right that should be guaranteed to all people, our current system greatly disenfranchises people living with disabilities and or mental illness. Historically, people with disabilities have been disproportionately denied the right to vote since the 19th century, when most states passed laws that simply did not allow them to vote. Today, the situation has unfortunately not changed very much. The majority of states still have similar legal provisions that deny the right to vote to people with mental incapacities." In quotes. The reason behind these restrictions include protecting the validity of the voting process and the prevention of voter fraud. However, in a time when voter fraud has been proven to be a non-issue, our society must seriously consider the consequences of voter suppression towards the disabled community and why they are being excluded in the first place. After all, voter suppression and barriers to voting have an impact. In the 2012 elections, the voter turnout among people with disabilities was 5.7% lower than people without disabilities. End quote. Um, that for me was kind of surprising to read because I didn't know that some states had, that some states have laws against people voting that live with learning disabilities or mental disabilities. And that doesn't really seem quite fair because even if that disability impacts your thinking process and being able to vote wisely, you should still have the choice and the right to vote, in my opinion, and be able to have a chance to educate yourself in um, the right in the right way of doing research that I mentioned earlier, and being able to express your opinion and your viewpoint, and be able to vote on things that you care about and that matter to you. Um, so I hope that this episode enlightens you in different ways that neurodivergents struggle with politics and voting and understanding everything with both those topics. And I hope that it maybe made you think, if you're in the political, how you can help neurodivergents be able to vote more easily and understand politics more easily. I will talk to you next Friday. Have a good weekend.
As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also, see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.